Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today, it's time to talk budget monitors once more, and this one is super interesting. It's the Pixio PX247. It's a 24-inch 1080p 144Hz IPS gaming display that is going head-to-head with the popular AOC 24G2 in the same entry-level market. Both use the same Panda panel, so we should be getting similar performance, and both pack sub $200 US price tags. In fact, right now, the Pixio PX247 is undercutting AOC by offering these specs at just $170 rather than $180, so a neat little $10 discount. At this price, it isn't the outright cheapest 1080p 144Hz IPS gaming monitor. That goes to the Asus VP249QGR at $160. But Pixio aren't standing by. They want their offering to be the most competitive on the market, according to what they've told us, and will be running promotions that bring the price down to $160 on Amazon shortly. As of preparing this review, it's still $170, but at times it should be the equal cheapest option available, and as you know, we love to talk about the cheapest given products in a category. In even better news, Pixio is starting to expand globally, so their monitors will be available outside North America moving forward. In fact, the PX247 should be available through Amazon in Europe shortly, joining some of their other options like the PX5 and PX7, which are already available. So that's pretty exciting for those after budget monitors in other territories. Aside from the specs I've already mentioned, the PX247 also offers adaptive sync support with low frame rate compensation, a must-have on modern gaming displays, and it works perfectly with both AMD and NVIDIA GPUs. One of the biggest differences between the PX247 and the AOC 24G2 is in the design. Pixio has gone with a much simpler, limited design, and that's clearly an area where they've been able to cut costs compared to AOC. I don't mind the simplistic plastic design with a super slim construction. There's nothing fancy or overly exciting here, and that's fine with me, but it does look and feel like a budget monitor. The biggest concern for me is the stand. Pixio's stand is your classic budget offering, short, basic, and limited to just tilt adjustability. Meanwhile, AOC offers the works with a height adjustable stand that allows for many more ergonomic positions. Pixio do come to the table with a VESA mounting option if you want to mount it yourself, but out of the box, the PX247 sits very low on your desk, and quite clearly the 24G2 has a huge advantage in this department. We're getting a basic array of ports here that are easily accessible on the back panel with DisplayPort 1.2 and HDMI 1.4. The DisplayPort supports up to 144Hz refresh rates, while HDMI tops out at 120Hz. There are built-in speakers here as well, but yeah, they're pretty terrible. Really bad. As for the on-screen display, unfortunately we have face button controls instead of a directional toggle, which makes navigation a bit tricky. Not a whole lot of features in here either. There is a backlight strobing mode and a variety of color controls, but no cheat crosshairs or other gamer features. Most people will be fine with this, but if you do enjoy a few of the extras provided by more expensive panels, yeah, you won't get that here. Enough on the design, let's talk performance, starting with response times through Pixio's 4 included overdrive modes. Off is, as expected, no overdrive, meaning we get a slow 9.37 millisecond grade-to-grade average and no overshoot. Nothing at all inspiring here, although performance is similar to the AOC 24G2 with overdrive disabled, as you'd expect given they use the same panel. The low overdrive mode is a huge step forward for performance. At 144Hz, we are now getting a 5.63 millisecond grade-to-grade average, which is a much stronger result. And overshoot is already starting to creep in, not to the point where inverse ghosting is a significant issue, but clearly error rates are higher here than they were with no overdrive. Then we get to the default mode, which is the middle overdrive mode. Performance is marginally better than with the low overdrive mode, improving the response time average to 4.86 milliseconds. Overshoot has also increased. We now see 4.5% of transitions with inverse ghosting issues, but this is still quite usable, and it's unlikely you'll see inverse ghosting in practice. With over 90% of transitions completing faster than the refresh window, this display is comfortably capable of a true 144Hz experience. Then we have the high overdrive mode, which gives us around a 1 millisecond improvement to response times at the expense of significant overshoot. This mode has obvious bright trails following moving objects due to inverse ghosting, so I wouldn't recommend using it. So the middle mode is the optimal point to be for 144Hz, but how does this mode fare across the refresh rate range? Well, it's a decent start at 120Hz, but performance does start to slip here with the introduction of more significant overshoot. Around 15% of transitions suffer from inverse ghosting, and this can be somewhat noticeable in games. Drop down to around the 85Hz mark, and it's clear the middle mode is not suitable for mid-range refresh rates. What about the low mode? Much better results at 120Hz with limited inverse ghosting issues and still sub 5 millisecond response times on average. However, again, when we drop down to 85Hz, we have significant overshoot concerns. 27% of transitions experience inverse ghosting, and once again, this means bright trails behind moving objects, which isn't a good look. Unfortunately, while the low mode is good for refresh rates down to about 100Hz, it fails to offer a good experience beyond that. So our only choice for lower refresh rates is to switch overdrive off. At 85Hz, this means an 8.67 millisecond gray to gray average with, thankfully, no overshoot. We do get more ghosting here than at higher refresh rates with more optimal overdrive, but if you know your performance is going to be more in this range, I would recommend overdrive off. Same story at 60Hz with very similar levels of performance. Like with many entry-level monitors, this puts us in a position where there's no best overdrive option for the entire adaptive sync range. Instead, you'll need to make a choice based on where you expect to be gaming most of the time. If it's up in the 120 to 144Hz range, middle overdrive makes sense. If you want good performance at a wider refresh rate range, I'd probably choose low. And if you'll be mostly near 60Hz, I'd recommend overdrive off. It's hard to say which of these modes would be my preference if I just wanted to set and forget a single mode. I'd probably lean towards low here as it does deliver much clearer images at higher refresh rates where I'd expect to be using this panel, but as an adaptive sync panel, the overdrive options aren't well optimized. Moving into some comparisons now, and at its maximum 144Hz refresh rate, the Pixio PX247 is competitive and delivers a great experience for gaming. Average response times are essentially identical to the AOC 24G2, although inverse ghosting rates are a bit higher at 4% versus 0%. Without going into a deep dive on this, the difference here appears to be the way each company has tuned their overdrive. AOC has a bit of a better approach, hence a small improvement to performance. The Pixio 247 also compares favorably to other 1080p monitors. We're in the ballpark of TN offerings like the 24GL600F, and better than most VA panels in our charts, including several others from Pixio themselves. If you're concerned about performance, opting for this IPS panel seems to be a solid choice. And this is reinforced by our dark level average charts, where VA panels clearly fall behind and present dark level smearing, whereas this isn't an issue with IPS monitors like the PX247. Response time compliance is excellent at over 90%, essentially matching the AOC 24G2 in this metric. Again, we see performance in the ballpark of competing TNs and above that of slower, cheaper VA monitors. At its optimal overdrive mode for 144Hz, again we see decent but not perfect results for error rates, falling in the middle of our charts, but given inverse ghosting is kept nice and low, we get an overall solid 144Hz experience. This next chart shows performance across several points in the adaptive sync range when set to the optimal overdrive mode for variable refresh gaming. You can quite clearly see the issue we face with overshoot on this monitor when hitting those 5 millisecond response times and how it compares to the AOC 24G2. There is no doubting that the AOC model fares better here. It's slightly faster than the Pixio model with lower overshoot at every refresh rate, although neither display is great at 60Hz. I've also thrown in a high-end 1080p IPS display in the MSI MAG251RX, so we can see how a monitor with variable refresh optimized overdrive fares. The sort of performance the MSI model shows is what we'd like to see in practice, but simply this Panda panel isn't good enough for that. Variable overdrive might also have helped to improve performance here, but that really isn't a budget monitor feature. What about input lag? Surprisingly, I recorded almost identical performance between the Pixio PX247 and the AOC 24G2, so there is no material difference in responsiveness between these displays. That's great news for buyers of either monitor. As for power consumption, the PX247 does consume a fair bit more power than the 24G2 when calibrated to 200 nits, although the PX247 is still a step better than other 24-inch 1080p 144Hz panels that I've tested. The PX247 does come with a backlight strobing mode for increased motion clarity, labelled the MPRT mode, but unfortunately it's not very good. The mode is only usable at a 120Hz refresh rate. There are horrible timing issues at 144Hz that create a jarring image, and even at 120Hz the results are unimpressive due to strobe crosstalk. The AOC 24G2's equivalent feature isn't much better though, so really I wouldn't recommend either of these monitors for backlight strobing. Color performance is an interesting one. The Pixio PX247 is not a wide gamut monitor, which is in contrast to the AOC 24G2 that provides around 90% DCI-P3 coverage. If you did want some form of wide gamut experience or increased vibrancy, the AOC monitor is your only option in this regard. But for gaming, I don't think this is a big deal as most games target an sRGB color space, so let's see how the PX247 fares for sRGB accuracy. My initial impressions were not good. The factory calibration of this panel is all wrong, with significant blue tint present with my review unit, causing high delta E's for grayscale. This is completely inaccurate and gives the monitor a distinct cold tone, which is very obvious, especially when placed next to a color calibrated display. Saturation performance isn't much better. There are some serious errors with how the PX247 presents colors from the factory. While the entire saturation graph is shifted due to the incorrect white point, there are also some weird stretching issues for greens and reds in particular. This bunching at the top of the green area on the graph shouldn't be happening, and neither should this stretching of reds. It's no surprise the delta E average is very high here, and this carries through to color checker as well. One aspect of the display's performance can be corrected via the OSD, and that's the incorrect white point. With some tweaks, I was able to get the delta E average for grayscale down below 2.0, which is fairly accurate, although there were some lingering issues with the CCT and gamma curves, but still a large improvement. Unfortunately, the saturation issues remain, especially for greens and reds as we talked about a moment ago. This sort of performance is going to make calibration a challenge, so let's see how the PX247 fares after a pass-through display cal. The results here for grayscale are certainly much improved, with a consistent, accurate experience across most of the grayscale range. Saturation performance is also improved, now with a delta E average below 1.0, although you can still see some of the struggles with greens and reds on the chart. This does lead to only an average result for color checker after calibration. Yeah, we do get a 1.35 delta E average, but with several colors producing delta E's above 3.0, this is not what I'd class as a color accurate display. After calibration, I also noticed some color banding with gradients, particularly green gradients, which could be a combination of the native 6-bit panel with the green performance issues I was talking about. Calibration can only do so much, and when it has to do a lot of correction work, issues can crop up as a result. While I don't think the PX247 is a great monitor out of the box, after a bit of calibration work, I suspect that most buyers will be happy with its performance. Issues like banding and some too high delta E's will be nitpicks for gamers. Again, wouldn't recommend this display for color accurate work, but a few tweaks and it still delivers a pretty good IPS experience for gaming. Panel brightness is around the same mark we saw from the 24G2 at 380 nits or so, which is very bright. Contrast, on the other hand, is notably lower at just 1100 to 1 compared to the 1450 to 1 we got from the AOC 24G2. Given these results, the differing color gamuts and the higher power consumption, I'm pretty confident the Pixio and AOC models use different backlights. The Panda panel both ship without a backlight, and it seems AOC have chosen a more premium option to pair it with, offering wide gamuts and higher contrast ratios. The PX247 isn't too bad here, but it's not at the same level as the 24G2. Viewing angles are better than I experienced with the AOC 24G2, which is a positive. Uniformity also seems to be very strong, with no noticeable difference across the entire panel. These are all typical benefits of an IPS display, and Pixio is delivering that here in several ways. So it's getting to the end of the review, and that means time to wrap everything up. I think this is going to be a pretty straightforward one, especially as you've just seen a bunch of comparisons between the PX247 and its main competitor, the AOC 24G2. There are several good aspects to this monitor. Response time performance is decent from an IPS panel, especially at high refresh rates, where the panel achieves around 5 millisecond greater gray figures. We're getting a wide adaptive sync range and great input lag too, so the gaming experience provided here is pretty solid. That's combined with several key benefits to IPS displays like excellent viewing angles, great brightness, good contrast, and superb uniformity. As is often the case for budget monitors though, there are multiple drawbacks. Factory calibration is bad, which leaves a lot of heavy lifting up to a calibration profile, and it can't solve everything. I did end up with acceptable results, but nothing spectacular. The design is also nothing amazing and comes with a very limited stand that lacks key features like height adjustability and a directional toggle for the OSD. Normally, I can forgive most of these issues in the budget class because there's always going to be drawbacks there. But that's not as easy to do when the AOC 24G2 exists and is priced so close to the PX247. Simply put, the 24G2 is a better monitor in nearly every aspect, from response time performance to factory calibration to contrast ratios and even to the design. In some of these areas, the difference is marginal. In others, like factory calibration or stand ergonomics, the difference is huge. That's not to say the PX247 is bad, because it's not a bad display. It's a bit mediocre in some areas, but it's not a bad product. It's just not as good as the 24G2. Whether you should choose the Pixio or AOC option is going to come down to your budget and how much you can afford. That said, at current prices, which has the PX247 at $170 and the 24G2 at $180, I think it's well worth spending the extra $10 on the 24G2. It's only a 6% increase to cost, and that brings with it a lot of improvement. If you don't have $10 left in your budget, I would really advise adjusting a few things to put the 24G2 in your price range. It's a bit different if the PX247 ends up at $160 on maybe a flash sale or perhaps on a more permanent basis. At a $20 difference, we're talking about an 11% cost saving, which is going to be significant for some budget buyers. If none of the drawbacks are that big of a concern for you, for example, you're just going to game on this display and you don't need height adjustability, then I can totally understand saving a bit of cash and grabbing the PX247. It's not a clear winner at that sort of price difference. I'd still lean towards the 24G2, but it's a much better place for the PX247 to be sitting. That's it for this review. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. As always, if you do want to support the channel, there's a lot of great ways to do that. You can subscribe and catch all the rest of our monitor reviews. You can also sign up to our Patreon page. It really helps the contributions that you make to us through there. If you want to get our display profiles, if you want to join us in our Discord chat, all that sort of thing, links to that are in the description below, along with our merch store. So check all of that stuff out, and I'll catch you in the next one.